at a dinner in a parishioner's home in December of 2011. We got to talking about the future of the church, and this particular couple was convinced that the future of the church was greatly dependent upon access to the church, on parking specifically. Within about 6 months, we assembled half a city block, and the driving motivation for all of that was parking.
I served on the strategic planning committee for Open Doors, Open Futures, and basically for 3, 4, 5 years attended bi-weekly meetings on the planning and the ultimate execution of the plan.
Our listening process, that kind of 2-year conversation, strategic conversation really about where we were going, what might we do with this property next door in addition to parking, was led by Jim Dayton, with James Dayton Design.
So, his vision of it, I think I just grabbed onto it and said, I admired his vision of what this project is and what it will be, and I went along with it. I just was excited about it.
None of us had any idea what we would end up with.
Somebody said recently, Jim Dayton's motto should be "Go big or go home," and here's a perfect example.
So Jim, I think, was eager to help us think where this, the idea of parking plus might take us. I don't think he really knew where we were going. None of us knew it was. And we didn't dedicate the facility until 2018. And it took us that long to sort of discern what the Spirit was doing among us as we went through this process, as we listened to each other and to the city around us.
It's been about an 8-year journey for us since the idea of expanding and acquiring the land and expanding the church.
This building has, and Jim, again, I give him great credit for this, he listened to us, and we all felt that working with him, we were designing a building. The building is designing us. And we designed a building with Jim's help that's transparent, that's engaged with the city around it, that's inviting, that's quite accessible and open. And all those adjectives now apply to the congregation itself.
So I know it was a much bigger leap of faith for Tim, for everybody, than they had originally planned.
He said, he would push me early on in the project, what are the biblical images that you work with as a pastor in a church like this? So I said, one of the things that have biblical images that have inspired me over the years in my ministry is the tree. The fruit tree particularly. It draws from the ecosystem and then it gives to the ecosystem. So I said, frankly, Jim, for me, the image of a tree is really critical in how I view the text of our faith with a life of a community of faith. And you'll see on the outside of the Nicollet Mall side, there's one central tree. It's a centennial elm tree. And it will grow to the height of this building. And then he took the tree inside, and it created this wonderful space. The Westminster Hall is meant to be the sensation of standing in a clearing in the forest, with leaves all around you and above you, and skylights letting natural light in to filter through the leaves, and pendants that look like stars coming through the leaves at night.
One of my favorite places is the meditation room, the contemplation, and it, I think, really provides a needed quiet space. And my other favorite place is the library. I love going into the library, and I'm always early to church, so I always go in, see what's new, and just sit down and check out the books and see who's in there.
And yet we always knew that the brick and mortar is just the beginning. It's what happens, in the space, and the human interaction with the brick and mortar is where the real payday, where the real return is going to come from. And
I think Jim was surprised as he went through this process about how much this was affecting him personally. in his own spirituality.
It's not just us, it's not just this congregation, but it's every person that in this community is an opportunity to get to know us better and to be able to utilize what the dreams that we've all had to build in this project at the church.
So Jim listened to us, we listened to ourselves, and out of this emerged some key features of where we could go in the future to open this church's opportunities for years, generations to come, really.
I feel very blessed to have had a part in it.
The tree really is what we can be as a congregation. We can produce ministry, fruits of our life together and share those with the community around us. From the start of Jim's design work, there were bells. It wasn't all about the bells, but it was eventually going to be bells.
As the design unfolded, it appeared as if there was going to be a bell tower, and Jim really had a dream and a vision to put something on top of that bell tower. And
The bell tower was always part of the design, the rose tower, and the bells were just the finishing touch.
I'm not sure I fully grasp at the time how important Jim felt the bells were to the entire project.
And that bell tower, once it came up and it was there and it's so beautiful and it was empty, it just needed to have bells.
And he's right in terms of the aesthetic, that bells there balance out the historic towers of the sanctuary. But I'm a practical guy working with a committee trying to raise the money for this project. I kept saying, couldn't we do the bells as an add-on later, 5-10 years from now?
I'm sure others have told you the stories about when Tim would bring a group in to Jim's studio and look at the models and hear about the plans, and when they all walked in, the bells were on top of the bell tower.
Into his
The
studio,
little models
there would
that
be the
Jim
bell
loved.
tower and the whole block, the model that he built, and the bells would be in the bell tower, and I'd get over there right away because I knew that he would have those bells in that tower. And I would lift them out and put them over to the side, kind of out of view. We'd have this wonderful conversation with a group from the congregation and potential donors, and
Have their meeting,
as
their
his staff told me
conversation,
later,
and
no sooner
they would
than-
all leave, and Jim put the bells right back on top.
Yeah, and in hindsight, I mean, it basically came down to the economics and said, well, we can only do so much, and
However, the bell tower stayed. The rose tower was always there and built with immense capability.
all the while we were working on the design and completing our campaign, and kind of unbeknownst to me, he was moving the bell part of this project forward. He was bound and determined that we would get to the bells. And
so there were just some things he said, well, wait. And then the City of Bells sort of appeared out of nowhere. And that really then started to re-energize us, saying, well, we should do this.
But the Bell Group, City of Bells, knew about the bell tower, and they knew, of course, about Westminster. Our place on Nicollet Mall was called Main Street, Minnesota, and there are no bells on the mall.
Personally, for me, bells move me. I have a passion for music, and bells are just something that I find irresistible.
Indications of gifts coming from, unsolicited really, from our congregation's leaders who had heard about this project. Just a handful of gifts came forward, and it was enough to convince a session to give us the green light, go ahead. Certainly when Jim died, which was obviously a terrible loss for his family, for his firm, and for the church, for the city. Westminster project was his largest project. It was his final project, and his vision was it would be finished when the bells were installed. People knew that, so we had a lot of support coming in from the community. Jim found what he thought were really the two best foundries in the world for bells, and they sent representatives to us. We interviewed them, and we settled on the Picard foundry.
We got to Picard through Jim,
Mm-hmm.
and he would have been on the trip with us.
Mm-hmm.
And then when the Bell trip came up, primarily I think because Jim was not any longer going on the trip, Jim asked if I'd like to come, which I thought was great.
Joni came along, and it was quite emotional for all of us to.
Well, first of all, it was emotional because Joni was the mother of Jim. And it was a very emotional time for her. And she kind of set the example for us that we needed to be brave as well.
We spent a lot of time in Europe, and I never paid attention to bells before we went to Europe, but bells are everywhere.
I'm not sure any of us had much of an idea of what to expect. And we felt that morning when we left the hotel, we felt like we were in the foundry because of the temperature of the air at that point.
The part that's the most memorable is going to the Picard foundry and being there for a couple of days. And they really haven't changed the way they do this. The technology in making the bells hasn't changed all that much over all these years.
It was to me like a big, oversized jeweler's studio because they have the tools and the carvings and the equipment they have is amazing.
And so I had actually been in molten iron foundries and had gas explosions and it sparks. So I was kind of going back into something that I'd seen before.
And then you look at the furnace, which is about 2 stories high, and you realize you're not in a jewelry studio, but it's a combination, really, because they have designers and artists and founders, and it's just a whole factory.
The heat and then the color of the color that's
The molten
color, the reds and the oranges, and
It was magical. It really was, to see this thing poured from the very beginning, to do the anticipation, to wait.
When they tipped that cauldron and started to pour that, it was really astonishing. We were all in awe. It was bright red.
It was the incredible heat that was generated. And it almost, I don't know whether I was just mesmerized because of seeing our bell poured, or whether I was just faint from the heat. But it was really quite a profound experience.
They poured it, and these probably 6 or 8 workers were totally tuned into each other about where they were. It's so technical, it's so dangerous, it's so hot that they have to do it perfectly. The emotion of it was quite incredible, and not just for me, it's not just about Jim, but to actually see these bells, and imagine them hanging from the top of Westminster. It was really quite impactful.
Oh yeah, when they come out of the mold, they're not as impressive looking as you would like them to be. They're kind of ashy and needing polishing, needing a lot of attention.
Well, luckily I didn't have to crack the mold off, because it took that young man quite a time with the sledgehammer to get that mold off.
Actually, the first one that was rung by Joni. She used a big mallet, and they just peeled off the mold of the bell that was hanging there. We asked Joni to ring it, and she rang it 3 times. I don't know exactly what was going through her head, but certainly going through my head was, this is being rung for Jim.
And the sound was beautiful. To me, it's unlike any bells I've ever heard. It's just beautiful.
it's emotional. I'm kind of a teardrop woman, and had my hanky out several times because it was just emotional to see these bells.
Made us very glad that we made the decision to come here. And we can't wait for the first ringing out.
Have a dedication April 5th, 2020. They'll be rung for the first time, and we'll have the congregation go out. Hopefully it'll be a beautiful spring day.
And waiting for the bells is just building the excitement even further. I can't wait till they're here.
He would come with his models, especially these bell towers, and people would have their input, and he would be on the side redoing one or creating another one, and listened and listened. And I can't wait to see what the decision is going to be, and to see the 6 bells that we're going to have.
I'm coming well prepared with my Kleenex.
And of course, the next Sunday is Easter, so what a great way to celebrate Easter with our bells ringing and a random peal, joining the bells of other churches in the city.
And all the beautiful churches around us have bells, and they ring. So now we're going to complete that circle.
And he knew they were going to be done. He just knew it, and it did happen, I think. A large part of that was his conviction. It is the finishing touch.
That will signal, I think, the completion of this project, but it also, to me, signals the opening of the future to this church.
It's Westminster speaking in sound to this city.
So we're experiencing in our life as a congregation the very thing that we dreamt about with Jim all those years as we thought about what God might be up to with this congregation.
I'm thinking that it probably finished the entire piece, and therefore the entire church, and the role of the church in downtown Minneapolis.
And I'm so grateful for Jim Dayton, for the way he painstakingly listened to us.
So I'm happy that he saw the church finished, for sure. And not quite finished, but he knew it was going to happen.
It's the culmination of lots of dreams and lots of vision by an incredible group of people.
And you'll encounter this congregation through those bells in ways you never would have before.
We're just now beginning to understand what this relatively short journey will be to the future of this congregation in downtown Minneapolis.
The life of this church and the life of the city will commingle in new ways because of the bells.
Every city should have some bells that are ringing all the time.
And those bells will, in a way, be the resounding signal that Westminster has entered a new era.